welcome everyone. Hopefully you can hear me, Brenna. I'm chatting here, but Elyse is going to be teaching our workshop. She has a camera of herself up and a camera down on her lettering worksheet already. If you want to go hang out and find those, you're welcome to turn on your video, turn it off, whatever you would like to do as you join us. So many people, so fun. All right. Got a few more people joining. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and just get started. So yeah, I'm Brenna. I am one of the people behind the scenes here at Punkpost, and I'm just gonna be helping Elyse tonight. If you don't know about Punkpost, you obviously found out about us somehow and you're at this workshop, but if you don't know about Punkpost, we're a team of handwriting artists that handwrite your cards and deliver them for you. I brought a few examples because not everyone has ever sent one or received one. So we have our printed fronts, and then these are handwritten messages on the inside, so completely custom. These are from my birthday this summer, really fun unicorn option. And then handwritten messages on the inside. And we also have tons of new cards. Elyse even has a card. I pulled it out. It's one of our happy birthday cards. It's a really fun one. But we have everything from, cats and airplanes and some cheersing happy hour Friday going on. And yeah, so that is Punkpost. We have an app and a website where you can order cards. We have more than 450 designs at this point, and we can write anything you want inside the cards. Yeah, and today on our workshop, Elyse is just going to be walking you through the worksheet, which hopefully you were able to download and get from our email. And you don't need really any fancy kind of markers. We're just going to be using some basic Crayolas today to go through the worksheets. You can write along with Elyse as we're going. The chat is just going to be coming directly to me, so I'm going to be feeding that to Elyse as we go, and at the end we'll have some time to answer any questions, but feel free to chime in as we go and she can answer them. Yeah, and I think the only other thing is you can toggle between Elyse talking and watching her write. Whatever you want to look at is fine. If you have any questions or concerns as we go along, feel free to chat and I will do my best to help us out. Otherwise, I'll let Elyse take it away.
Hi. So like Brenna said, my name's Elyse and I'm a handwriting artist with Punkpost, and I started, time is very fluid for me right now with the state of things. So I'm like, it was this year, I think it was March, very end of March, I believe. And I'm a trained drawer and painter, and that's what I went to school for, but I was really severely underemployed when I was just out of graduate school. And so I started bullet journaling as a place to keep working on things, to doodle stuff. And then that got me into hand lettering. And my mom has always been able to do calligraphy. And yeah, the combination of having some interest, but mostly a lot of time, gave me the ability to get good at it and make it a part of my daily life. So I am going to hover my mouse over my screen that has my my top down view here, and I'm going to click the three buttons in the right hand corner and just click pin video. So hopefully you can do that too and see my writing space really big. I'm definitely a nerd for facts and history and things like that. So I love approaching even hand lettering with a little bit more of formality, with calligraphy type introductions. So one thing that's really important to think about when you start hand lettering is you have a comfort zone in front of you for writing. And I'm right-handed, so my comfort zone is basically from my left shoulder to my right shoulder. It gets to be pretty uncomfortable and difficult when I go further either direction. So you want to think about that and really manage your paper as you're writing. So you don't want to force yourself to write way out here and write way down here. So I'm going to try to remember to move my paper quite a bit, because the paper should work hard and we should not have to. And then secondly, the other really ideal thing, even though we're using these wonderfully inexpensive, easy to get markers, I like to go over just like the proper way to approach the page and how to sit. Now, this is just what's best. And I definitely write a lot of my punk postcards sitting on the couch. And I'll even do stuff like this in my lap, like with my lap desk. But technically speaking, you want to sit not quite straight on to your writing surface, but a little bit to the side. Usually that's what's comfortable for most people. And I'm sitting on my feet right now. I have to admit that. I need to put my feet flat on the floor. Okay, so you don't want to be sitting on your feet. You want to sit with your feet flat on the floor. And then the ideal thing would be to have your writing surface at a height where you can move your shoulder and your elbow freely. I know this is a really long preamble to get into Crayola calligraphy, but we have the most nerve endings in our fingers, and so they feel the most sensitive. I mean, they are the most sensitive, but that doesn't mean they're the most strong or the most ideal for lettering. So rather than moving your hand a ton and working your wrist and all these muscles in your hand, you actually want to letter from like your elbow and your shoulder. So being able to just freely scoot your arm over your page is really fantastic for that. So those are just like the ideals, but like I said, I would do this in the car if I needed to. So you don't have to have the perfect setup and the perfect situation to hand letter. But I just like for people to know the more you do stuff like this, of course, the better you'll get, but also you can end up like straining your muscles and things like that. So when I use a Crayola marker, I always put the cap on the back, and I don't like it when pens don't have that because I'm going to lose this if I don't do that. You can hold your marker however is comfortable for you. I always encourage that. I don't know why I do this or where I started it, but it's really comfortable for me when I do hand lettering, especially with a big chunky marker like a broadline from Crayola. I like to put it in between my index finger and my middle finger, and then I hold it kind of like regular. But that's just me. I've never seen anybody else do that. So I'm not saying you should do it. You should hold your marker however it's comfortable. And we're looking at block letters today, which you could write without changing your pressure at all and just make them really simple, like the same line weight. Weight refers to when a line is heavy or thin. So that's heavy weight, thin weight. And this alphabet uses the concept of being able to use this marker really easily to switch from thin to thick. So of course, hopefully you're comfortable and used to writing with just the tip of a marker, and so you can get a nice thin line. And then I do a combination of pressing harder with this marker, but also turning my angle just a little bit so that I can get like that little chisel bit to sit down on my page more. So I push hard, but I also twist just a little bit. So you want to make sure you're comfortable going back and forth between these. So that's like a good warm up, thin and thick strokes. And I think we're gonna get into it. Okay, so I have most of my letters going from the top line all the way down to the bottom line, and making sure that you get like a really even thick stroke that starts right at that top line and comes down to the bottom line. It sounds really simple, but it's easy to like start shy of that or go a little bit past your mark. So I start with that first mark, try to start right at that line and end at the next one. And then I find that it's easier to do my next line straight down from the top on the right. It's easier for me to watch my marker end at that baseline there. So rather than coming up from the bottom. And then I cross this. I think like kind of the lower you put your little crossbar, sort of the more playful it looks. So I almost started that wrong. I was like, this feels wrong. Okay, I'm gonna start at the top and pull downward. And then just do the little cross there. So you can see, like, first of all, I'm very inconsistent today, which can be fun, actually. I like to do a row of letters, and when they're really inconsistent like this, I'll pick out my favorites or sometimes assign them personalities. Like this one's a little bit skinnier, so to me it looks like it might be a little bit quiet and shy. And this one's the biggest, and it's taking up too much space, so maybe it's kind of a loudmouth. For my B, I start at the top line and just pull straight down. So very similar to the A. And then I kind of think of the B actually as like looking like a butterfly. So I like to have my kind of pinched loop or my pinched oval right here, I like to have that kind of point upward, like it's optimistic or something. So I start a little ways down my thick downstroke, and then I come out as far as I want my letter to go. And then when I start to turn back, that's when I change my pressure and I press harder. And then I start my next little butterfly wing the same way. And when I get out as far away from my letter as I want to be, that's when I start pushing down again. So heavy downstroke, and then starting a little bit below the top, coming back in. You'll notice like big differences if you make the circle bigger at the bottom versus the top of your bee. It really changes like the energy to them. So if you're not sure what you like, try making one part too big and one part too small, and then do the opposite, and you'll get the Goldilocks effect and figure out what you like best. So with your C, it is, one of the things that's different about hand lettering often versus like writing, your regular handwriting for writing a note or something, is we often pick up our marker a lot more than you would want to if you were just writing for speed. But C is one of those letters that I write all in one go, and I start just below the top line here. And that's a light stroke, so I'm keeping that thin. And then as soon as I crest the first curve, that's when I start pressing really hard. And then when I come down to the bottom line, before I touch that bottom line, I start thinking about letting up my pressure. So it's light pressure, heavy pressure, and then light again. And it's totally normal to come back and adjust some of these little tails and things. That's something professionals do too. So if you don't get your letters perfect on the first go with every single move, you can always come back and adjust them a little bit. One of the ways you can keep like visual consistency in your letters is to think about these really basic ones like the letter C, and ask yourself, do I want this to be like an oval? Would it fit within an oval shape, or would I prefer it to fit within a circle? If you wanted it to fit within a circle, it would create like a much wider arc, and that just has like a different kind of charm to it.
I've got a question for you. They're asking if you're like twisting the marker to make it fatter, or if it's how you're making it fatter. A little more on that.
It is let's see. It's really a little tiny bit of both. It's mostly pressure. So yeah, it's actually almost only pressure. Okay, so yeah, I'm holding it at an angle to the paper. And let's see if I can. It is probably about like that is my angle, I would say. So this is not probably helpful. Maybe one person can see it this way, but that's
I think that interestingly shows, you can see that her tip of her marker is a little like bent from the pressure. And there's nothing like wrong with that. Like the more you do it, it will kind of like get a little curve to it.
And then sometimes when I decide it's like too curved, like it's almost like I like to work in a marker and get it to bend a certain way. And then once it starts doing it too much, I'll just flip it 180 degrees so that the little curve is up and I'm like pushing it back to where it needs to go. So for my D, I actually like to start this loop even lower than I do on my B. And I pull it further out than I think it should go. Like my instinct is to do it like I learned like in school, and to have this be like really skinny like that, like really narrow. But after I do my heavy downstroke, I pull out toward the right more than I think I should. And you get this, I think, really cute little triangle shape right here. And I like the size of the D. Although one of the ideals for me is coming in at the bottom and making it really slick and clean right there. And you can see on my first two, I did not do that. So I need to pay more attention probably. So heavy downstroke, and then a little bit above that midline, I start. And now I'm like oh my gosh, I think I might make a sports reference, which is crazy. You want to keep your eye on where your marker is going to go. Just kind of like keeping your eye on the ball, I think. But I'm like watching the tip of my marker come closer and closer to that spot.
I think that's a good example of like the slower you go,
Mm-hmm.
the better chance you have of being able to like hit those spots. And there's nothing wrong with taking it really slow, especially when you're starting out.
Yes. When you watch lettering videos, usually they're sped up. Like I've heard lettering artists say they're usually sped up by like 4 or 8 times on average. And I'm definitely more like an Energizer bunny and I go too fast through things. So the best advice is almost always to slow down. So my letter E is like a little bit narrow. It could definitely be wider, but I think it's really charming being so narrow like that. So I do my heavy downstroke. And then the other thing I realized I do when I was developing this worksheet, so I do my heavy downstroke and then I'm going to start right at the back of this E, the back of that downstroke. I put my, my footer, that little line there, I don't know if that's actually what it's called. I put it at like a little bit of an angle upward. And I do that on the top as well. And then I make that middle dash just a little bit shorter. I think it gives it a really charming effect. So one heavy downstroke, and then I pull from that downstroke out. So I never have that issue of missing the line. Like if I come this way, I might not hit the line where I want to. So I start on my downstroke for all of these. That way they all touch. But just like I was saying with like the Goldilocks thing, you can try extending some of these and see like what kind of feeling they give you, and also just moving where that middle bar is too changes it up quite a bit. I also have a tendency to start hunching. Like, I think I just get interested in what I'm doing and I end up with like my head 1 foot away from my page. So every now and again, I need to remind myself to sit back up straight, get my feet on the floor and hold my chest up so that I can actually breathe. If you hunch over like that, you won't get enough oxygen. You'll get really sleepy. So just like my E, I come down with a heavy downstroke and then I'm going to do my top bar first because it's bigger. And then I'm going to do my little one down there.
Got somebody asking if Crayolas are your go-to for creating cards and lettering, or if you have any other favorites as well.
I love markers and products in general. So I have lots of favorites, but especially if I have a shorter message, I love Crayola broadlines because they are so pigmented and juicy and inexpensive. But I have a hard time writing kind of smaller with these broadline markers. I have a really heavy hand, and so I push real hard. So I naturally want to make big letters. So for smaller stuff, I like sign pens, and let's see, that's a sign pen. It has like a flexible tip. We can look at this stuff later too in more depth. But I love that for writing smaller, and like monoline markers.
And what is a monoline
Yeah,
marker
good point. I'm like, is
specifically?
that even the right word? Straight markers that are felt tip that don't have any give to them. So the markers that are meant to just make like a skinny line. Like Crayola does a skinny tip. I don't know what it's called though.
Yeah, or like a Papermate Flare would be a really small version of that.
Yeah, yes, a Papermate Flare would be a really small version of that. I'm thinking I have a set from Pentel that I really like. Okay, so my G starts really similar to my C, but actually, I think I take the top like kind of curve of the G longer than I do on my C. So it's closer even to that midline when I start. And then I just do a little dash. I'm also naturally allowing my marker. I start with kind of a thinner downstroke in the top of the G, and I allow it to get thicker as I come down. I think that's just something that's harder to do. It's harder to make that perfectly even with broadline markers versus like a traditional brush tip, but I think it's charming to let it stay that way.
Yeah, Crayola markers like this, the broadline ones, are a great place to start for brush lettering, kind of get that feel of pressure and stuff before you're
Yeah.
really all the way in there with a brush.
Yeah, because this makes it kind of obvious because it changes so much between pressure and like heavy and light pressure. And also, these are made for like children, so they can take a pretty intense beating, whereas your brush markers need to be respected if they need to last. So my H is just 2 heavy downstrokes, and I'm starting to make my downstrokes really thick. And then my little crossbar, I like to put low. That's what I'm doing with this alphabet. So my downstrokes are starting to get really thick, and that's probably because my marker is just a little bit tired. I don't know. I've never said that before, but that's how it feels to me. Like, I don't want to just twist it around. I want to get a fresh one that's going to be a little bouncier. So now naturally, like my same amount of pressure, I think it's the same amount of pressure, makes slightly smaller downstrokes. H is another really good letter to think about for kind of calibrating your whole alphabet. H could be sitting inside of a rectangle like mine does, so it's like taller and narrower, but you could also draw an H that sits more inside of a square. So that would be like a really wide, low letter. So with my I start with my heavy downstroke, and then I do these little bars. I always, because I'm right-handed, I think, I always start on the left and pull toward the right, at least almost always, because that's a more natural move for my hand to make. It's harder for me to go from right to left across my body the opposite direction. And when I'm doing a really good job of paying attention, I like to put just a little imperfect line at the bottom of my eye. Like it's got just a little kick. That might be a bit much. This one's having too much fun.
Do we have any lefties out there that would pull their eye like crossbar, little bars across the other way? I'm just curious.
I would love to know too. So my J is almost the same as my I, but when I'm pulling down like this, right before I get to that bottom line, I start letting up my pressure. And your goal here is to have a round shape between your heavy downstroke and your light upstroke. It's really easy to end up with something that looks more like a V, or at least it's easy for me, because this happens when you have too much heavy pressure all the way down to the bottom and you don't let up quick enough. So here, my pressure probably stops about right there, and I'm starting to let it up as I go here. So that's a really great way to like analyze your letters. Things that are round, are they really round when you look at the inside of it and think about coloring the inside, or are they more like V shapes?
Yeah, it takes a lot of extra control. Something you develop over time to be able to always do it.
My K starts with that heavy downstroke, and then I always start at the top of my next piece, because otherwise I could easily like go way out of control and just go off the rails. So I start with my downstroke, and then I come from where I want my line to end to the middle. And then I like to give it just a little more flair. So I put like medium pressure and do a little kind of out turn on that, a little like flick upward. But you could totally just come in and then go back out and have it be more of like a basic block letter.
When you ever did the little kick out, do you like touch the next letter that you're gonna write?
I always do when I'm writing lowercase letters, but typically with block letters, typically I try to leave them separate because I often want to do like a little drop shadow. But if I do that and connect like 1 or 2 letters, then I will connect all of them. And that's how I change my style without meaning to. So I'm trying to have too much fun with this L again. My little line at the bottom is kind of short because I want my L to fit into a tall, narrow rectangle like that H. So I'm keeping that short, but I want it to sit just in between being perfectly flat on that baseline and kicking up just a little. But again, like this one is having way too much fun. It's kicking up way too high.
They want to have a good time.
Yeah, they do. They're here to party. M's give me a lot of trouble because I kind of naturally would make my one M maybe like this wide. So I need to use like a lot of self-control with these and really like talk myself through it. So I start with my heavy downstroke, and then I like to start at the top of that downstroke and just draw my diagonal line to the center point. And then I start like I'm actually twisting my whole arm and starting at the top for the next short piece. And I'm just going to come right to that center point where it touches. So it's basically thick and then thin and then thick and then thin. So heavy downstroke, starting at the top, going to the center, and then I start at the top on the right and pull toward the center, and then a light downstroke so that I have a variation in line weight in this letter, and it keeps it smaller.
That's true, by only giving it one large leg. I don't know. Are they legs?
Yeah, I think they're legs. I think so. If they're kicking, right? No, but I think they're. I'm going to say it's because it's the end of the night for me that my letters are inconsistent, but I really don't have an excuse. For my N, I like to do it in like a more traditional way. So I'll do like, this is what I would have learned in school. Heavy downstroke, diagonal toward the right, and then I start at the top and do a heavy downstroke again. But you can absolutely do 2 heavy downstrokes and then just connect them with a diagonal. What you're looking for in each letter, like obviously my letters are wildly inconsistent today, which is fun. What you want for consistent letters would be for all of these N's to be the same, but within each individual letter, if you can get these 2 triangles to be the same, that is, the same amount of space that they take up, obviously they're adjusted, but that's what's going to help a lot with consistency between your letters. Like this one's pretty narrow right here, and this one's bigger. So it's like a little bit awkward. That's kind of what's going on with that N. This one is fairly even, it's just bigger. So I would say this N looks more confident than this one, even though this one is probably closer to the original.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting those differences with another color. It's nice to like investigate a letter.
Oh yeah, like really spend some time with it. Yeah.
Anybody's hands out there getting tired, like writing slow and really concentrating makes your hand sore after a while. So if you're feeling it, it means you're doing it right.
True. It's also really good to do stretches.
Nice.
Yeah. It's like learning to speak another language too. Like people will say, I wouldn't know, but they'll say that your mouth gets sore in different places, and like your muscles are getting sore in new ways because of like how different this is, but they'll get more used to it. So I like to think of my O as 2 pieces instead of one continuous loop. So I start at the top, go out toward the left, and I'm basically, I guess I'm kind of making like a crescent moon type shape. I want to make sure that this is narrow at the top and bottom, and then I just close it up. So heavy downstroke, I'm curving that outward, and then I like to go from the bottom to the top, I guess, but there's no reason why you couldn't do the opposite. And in fact, often it's more comfortable to pull your hand downward than it is to push it up. So one of the things a lot of people talk about in the beginning is having shaky upstrokes. So trying to get that thin line, and it'll be, you know, naturally shaky. So if you're struggling with that, just know that it takes time and it'll go away. But also, when you can, pulling a line from the top down might help with that.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that. Like when I first pick up a pen for the night or something, it's my hand's not quite ready to go. Got to give it a few
Yeah.
practice strokes.
That's something I always have to remind myself, that professional hand letterers, calligraphers, everybody warms up, and professional athletes do too. So like, I need to remember not to just jump in on the project. With my P, I'm also like I'm thinking about starting a little bit lower, like maybe halfway between that midline and the top line. And I'm trying to make like kind of a little triangle shape there with a thin line, and then I increase my pressure as I bring it back. This one got a little wide, but like I talked about on my letter D, I think I like to get a nice little triangular shape between my heavy downstroke and then my circle on the right. So anytime you have an opening in any of your letters, you can come through and look like you're kind of graffitiing it and check out those inside shapes and see how similar or how different they are. You could also do that with your little triangles up here too.
I had someone just commenting that the letters with the curves are harder than the ones that are straight.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. That totally goes down to the like the muscle control and everything. Those smooth lines are so much more difficult for us than the straight ones. The straight lines are, we encounter those a lot more in regular everyday life.
Exactly.
Yeah. So whenever you need to, like, downshift when you're practicing into lines or letters that don't have as many curves to them and get your confidence back. All right. So my Q is basically the same as my O. And then I just pull a little line from the center down to the bottom line. Because again, if I started here and pulled in, I might go crazy, and then that doesn't really look like a Q anymore. Also, breaking these down into multiple pieces helps a lot when you start. So thinking of one stroke, and then you can even like readjust your hand, and then the one to finish it, and that little guy. So my letter R starts with heavy downstroke, and then again, I guess I'm starting all of these pretty much in the same place, kind of halfway between my midline and my heavy downstroke. Is where I like to start the top curve for that R. And then like I do with my K, I have kind of a medium thick, medium heavy line coming off the bottom of the R there. Heavy downstroke, starting halfway between my midline and the top line. I push down heavier when I get to like the apex of that curve, and then just kind of a medium. Whew. All right, that one got really big. He looks a little top heavy, like he might fall over. Brenna, do you feel like your letters, when you write them like that, do you feel like they have little personalities, or am I?
Yeah, I think especially like when I write cards, they will have more of a personality depending like what I'm writing. Like if it's more of a fun card, they'll get a little freedom and they'll get to
Yeah.
like,
Freedom.
go outside their lines a little more. But
Yeah.
if it's, try to keep them in line, keep them between my lines,
Yeah.
for sure. They depend.
S's are I think before Punkpost, they were kind of the bane of my existence. I think it's because I had to write so many for cards and things like that that I've gotten more comfortable with them. But you can break this down and think of it as like a little first little curve, and then heavy pressure. It's almost just a diagonal line, but heavy pressure, and then it's going to start to turn at the bottom. And then you could think of that as light pressure again. Yeah, so that shows actually where my pressure is going as I'm doing this.
We had somebody who is loving all the personalities. Makes them come to life.
Okay, good. I'm glad it's not too in my head, artsy, artist, weirdo. All right, so for my S's, one of the things that helps me keep them kind of consistent and make sense is I try to make that top circle or top open space smaller than the one at the bottom. So I think about that first curve as being kind of small, and then the one on the bottom, I like to have it bigger. That's pretty extreme. But when you do the opposite, it can be really cute, but it's just got a really different look to it. And often when I do my S's like this, I feel like I just want to get on the computer and flip it around because it looks upside down to me, because
it's not the way you
this is what fits in with my font better. But another way to think about that, if that's giving you trouble, I don't know if that's unique to me, but like I said, S's were super tough for me. You can think about two circles, I guess like a full colon. And then starting at the halfway point of this first circle, you can work your way around and then draw in between them and end at the halfway point of the other one. And that can be a nice way to start thinking about the letter S if it's giving you trouble the way it used to give me trouble. This T is super basic, just heavy downstroke and a light stroke across the top. And I like it because it's kind of narrow, like the rest of my letters. This is kind of like a more narrow font. But of course, if you make that bar really long, gives it like a different personality. And that could look really interesting to start a word or like in the middle of a word. So the letter U. I start with a heavy downstroke, and then I do this whole first part of the letter in one go. And that's because this is considered a basic stroke in brush calligraphy, but I start pulling down, and when I get almost to the bottom line, that's when I start to let up my pressure, and then I pull up. There's no reason why you have to do that completely. I make it that way because it's the way I learned with brush lettering, but you could absolutely do a heavy downstroke and then pull up and just let it go like that, almost like a little lowercase letter I. So this is probably an easier way to make it. Right to there. Don't dot it because it's not an I, it's an uppercase U. And then just a heavy downstroke right there. And that'll keep your U, it might be easier to keep it rounded at the bottom, and it'll keep it like narrow so it fits in with the rest of it.
When you're usually like writing cards or practicing, do you usually have lines that you're writing with, or are you freehanded?
Kind of bad, and I often don't have lines, but most hand letters that I've watched on like YouTube or whatever, and they talk about like this is what it's like behind the scenes, most of them say that they use a line.
Gotcha.
What about you?
I always use lines.
Yeah, that's smart. That's probably why your lettering is straight.
I just really struggle with writing straight otherwise. So
yeah, me too. Okay, so with the V, I do a heavy downstroke, and then I like to start at the top line here and pull downward. Because again, if I don't, I'm probably going to find myself doing something like that, which could be cool, but not if I'm doing that to every letter. And all you can really do with such a basic V is play with how wide it is. So I keep mentioning how this is kind of a narrower font, but you could absolutely make that really wide. And that'd be a fun like way to branch out and make a different kinds of letters for yourself. So the W also gives me trouble because it's like the M. So I used the M as like a starting off point for myself. for how wide I wanted this to be. And then also I used the same like method of making, just basically upside down. So I'm going to start with a slightly angled heavy downstroke, and then I'll start just above that midline and pull a skinny line to the left, and then a heavier line to the right. And then I'll start at the top here and pull straight down. So your goal here also for unified, consistent looking letters would be to have these triangles basically the same. Okay, so this one looks a little funky because it's bigger on the left than it is on the right.
Leaning into it.
There we go. That's a consistent one. So I love X. This one hopefully feels good. It's just 2 straight lines. And if you really needed to, you could angle your paper quite a bit so it can feel like an even straighter line for you. But I just like to start each line at the top. And you want these to cross close to the middle.
We had somebody who was saying they hate letters that you're loving. And
oh my God, that's so cool. Okay, so I wonder what letters they love. I love hearing that too. If people have favorite letters or least favorite letters, it fascinates me. Okay, so for my Y, I usually get in trouble if I start with the piece on the left and then I try to do this. Okay, so now I made one that looks pretty good. But often when I do that, it's a mistake. So when I was thinking about this alphabet, I decided to start with the right-hand side of the Y first, and then just finish it with that little guy. That just makes a stronger base for me to start with.
We got people who hate M and W.
Yeah, I'm with you there. No, there's some like brush lettering. I really love M's and W's now with some, there's some brush lettering ways I like to do it.
And also blasphemy that anybody could like the letter X.
It's so easy. It's our little buddy. We rarely get to write it. So for my Z, again, thinking about like, this is another letter I don't write very often. So it's easy for me to feel like it gets like pretty wonky and I want it to fit in with everybody else. So starting with that diagonal line first, like I do with my Y, is a great place to start. And this angle is insane. Okay, yeah, that angle's better. And then I pull from my heavy downstroke outward and then pull from the left to the right. So that's keeping with my left to right theory that's easier for me because I'm right-handed. Oh my gosh. So I keep writing this angle really extreme and it would make my Z look kind of gigantic. So that's why I don't want that. So having like somewhere halfway between straight up and down and at like a really extreme angle like this makes for a nice sort of chill Z. If it was really extreme, then it's like extreme Z. Obviously.
Yes, we got somebody who hates I and U, but then we have somebody who loves a good V.
See, V, I don't have a lot of love for. I need to like get, I mean, actually, I'm pretty into that.
That one is pretty fancy.
It is pretty fancy. It's got places to go. Well, if you guys have any questions about any of these letters, I know this is like kind of basic, but having good block letters that go together nicely is really fun for combining with other things. So like mixing up your hand lettering fonts.
Yeah, I guess if you guys have any questions or anything you want to see specifically, but otherwise, Elyse, if you have any other tips or writing whole words, or any ways to make things fancy looking.
Oh, this is a bad color to start with. Yeah, pipe up if you have questions. I'm going to start writing the word two-tone, and then I'm going to color it in with two tones.
Okay, I have a question of what is the simplest thin line accent that works on these letters?
Oh my gosh, that is such an excellent question. Let me think about it for a minute. Okay, before I put in my second color, I'm gonna give this a little, I mean, it can be smart to give your marker a little minute to dry, but thinking about an accent that you could do with like a single line. One thing you could really easily do anytime to block letters would be to add serifs. So serifs were originally around because they help our brains read faster, which is why like your professor probably insists that you write something in Times New Roman because it's easier on their eyeballs. But a serif is just like a little straight line. Well, it can be. One of the ways to do a serif is a straight line at the end of everything. So that would be one of the first things I would probably do to make this, like to change it up. So anywhere that you have a straight line, you can put those little serifs. But actually, I would say also this alphabet lends itself really, really well to not so much like adding extra bits onto the letters, but changing them up after you've written them. So I'll just do the letter B. Because it's so thick, you can do lots of different things. One thing you can do is write a skinny line down the center. And that's like a cute, really simple way to like jazz it up. So I'd probably go more toward this kind of a thing, two-tone or like shadows, rather than doing something other than serifs, I think. Another thing, if you want to get into more decorative things though, you could do, I think because you said single line, that's what made me think of this specifically, but you could do a cute little couple of dashes somewhere and just go through every letter and add 2 little dashes. And that's, as long as when you make a change to your letters, if you keep them consistent, it's going to look purposeful and be like a nice variation.
A cute little idea. You can let you finish your two-tone.
I like to do that with dots too, like just put a little dot to the left of every letter or something. Anyway, okay, my favorite way to do this is to take another piece of paper and divide my word. So you can do it straight across, but if you're using a piece of paper, you could even like make 2 tones go across the 2 different words. Okay, I'm gonna keep it really simple though, and I'm gonna make this 2-tone. So I'm gonna leave the orange lettering on the bottom, and I'm gonna change the top to red. So I'm gonna draw from my extra piece of paper here onto my other letter, especially with super tips, which is another version of a Crayola marker that we love. Especially with those, if I draw from up here onto my piece of paper, I will actually cut into this felt tip sometimes. Has that ever happened to you, Brenna?
Yeah, and then I'm like, oh no, I hurt it.
Yeah, it always happens with yellow. I'm like making rays of sunshine or something, and then I cut it on a card and I'm like, well, now it's blunt. So I'm not even filling out the entire letter right now, maybe because I have no patience, but I'm just drawing from that piece of paper onto my letters so that I have that really precise, crisp, straight line. So that's what's left over on my page. Now I have this awesome straight line. And this is another big tip I like to do all the time. There's no reason why you have to draw on your letters with them facing like the right way to read. So it's a lot easier for me to trace over this if I turn it upside down. So I'm just not going to go any lower than where my piece of paper cut off between orange and red.
It's a really smart way to make it so crisp. I've never thought of that.
I really thought I could do it by hand, and I tried a lot in the beginning, and a lot of letters went from like half orange, half red to fully red.
Yeah, it's hard to keep that consistency.
Yeah. And it actually, little teeny tiny changes show immensely when it's like something this skinny between like
Mm-hmm.
the red to the orange. In fact, I have like a nice little bumpy imperfection there. But yeah, I feel like you can be really precise, but it still looks imprecise. So then
Nice.
I'm going to fake it a little bit. Thank you. That's what you want to hear. I'm going to thicken this up just a little bit though. That way nobody has to know that there were these little bumps with my O's. Actually, there's one here too. So this works especially well with thicker letters, I think. If they were really skinny all over, I mean, it can look really cool, but it works especially nicely with these
Nice.
thick ones.
Yeah, it's really fun. And it's colors that are like close like that, like the red and orange look really nice with that like hard cut off like that. Yeah. Got someone who's asking if you can do some more S's.
Yes. Let me grab another sheet of S's here.
And while you're doing that, somebody said they were noticing the tip of their markers bending over time as you use them. You kind of touched on that earlier. Do you notice that some bend more so than others? And like, when do you like give up on a marker?
That's a great question. Yes, definitely. I notice them bending differently. And yeah, actually, if you watch some people whose like specialty on YouTube is just reviewing pens, they'll talk about that, like how quickly the tip bounces back. I think with broadline markers, you can actually get them to stay a little bit bent. So I usually like to, I guess I don't usually cap a marker without, well, that's not true. Yeah, sometimes I uncap my markers and they're bent a certain way, and that just means I start on the other side usually. And I'm really, really hard on markers. Like I have a very strong grip. Naturally, I have just really strong grip, and my writer's callus has come back full force. Like I couldn't keep it away through Mother's Day. Anyway, so yeah, I'm very heavy-handed, and I would say with these, I've never had the tip die before it runs out of ink. So yeah, they always run out of juice before the tip like expires, I would say.
And so that's my experience with Crayolas as well, unless I, like you said, cut it the wrong way on a like paper, or I put the cap. Sometimes I put the cap on the wrong end, and like
I do that all the time with super tips. I'm just not as used to them, but I just keep talking about them because I know Brenna specifically loves super tips. But I did use like all super tips today with my cards because they had such pretty colors. Because I bought a 50 pack.
They do have lots of colors. Yeah.
So one of the things I would love to know more about, like why you want to go back to S's. One of the things that is also happening with this S is like the angle that the thick line is at is something that is very like particular. And if that's going to be slightly different or very different, that would affect your letter a lot. And one of the ways you can check this stuff, other than just drawing a straight line, is to have a little ruler, and especially a clear one. You can see like halfway between the letter and the marker on the page. So hopefully you can see like the mid line better. And that way you can analyze if they're consistent or if there's one that you love best, like why. Really get to know that letter and see why you love it best.
Yeah, they were having a hard time getting that diagonal.
Another thing you could do, if you ever have tracing paper, that's also a great tool. But like you could take a small, this is also a monoline pen. You could take a monoline pen and draw the diagonal you want to go over first. Then I'll use a black pen, black marker. You can actually follow that. And that can be like a good training wheels, basically, to get that right. Because it's also partially getting your hand to remember what it feels like. And I say remember, but it's a huge misnomer that we have muscle memory. But basically, between your brain remembering things and your muscle being conditioned to do a certain thing, the effect is something that feels like muscle memory. So actually, Another great way to think about letters is to think, okay, what shape would that fit into? Like I was doing with my orange color. So my S would fit into a tall rectangle. And then I think the angle will be about right there. And this helps too, because then you have like a goal. Oh, also. So one of the things I point out about my S's, I like the bottom curve to be bigger than the one on top. So like, hopefully this makes sense. This line on the outside edge goes further out, and this line at the top edge actually cuts through that angle right there. So I can give myself a little guide and say, come right, not to the very far edge, but just inward a bit. And then I do want to go to here. So, okay, hopefully this will make sense now that I do it. This is where I'm starting, that little line I gave myself, that first curve, and then I'm following the diagonal line, and then I'm going to go all the way out to the outside edge of my little box there.
Yeah. So you said that your tips are helping. They got it.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah, it's difficult to remember. I remember being a kid and asking my family to teach me how to blow a bubble with bubble gum, and they had a really hard time explaining it, because this is the kind of stuff where sometimes once you know it, you almost can't remember what it was like to not know it.
Mm-hmm. I had somebody asking about your serif letters. Sometimes when they do serif, it looks really busy. And are there any tips making it like cleaner, or maybe if you write like a word, like a whole word with serifs?
Yeah. Yeah, serifs are, they can definitely start crowding things up for sure. And there is like a long tradition of different styles of serifs. So there's there are decorative ones, and basically I think the smaller you keep them, especially toward the beginning, the sort of safer it feels. So beginning with just the tiniest little bar. And this is also going to highlight if my H has like a narrower top than the one on the right, because I just wasn't pressing the same amount. My serifs are going to kind of highlight that. So I'm going to be more particular about like kind of cleaning up these letters, making them more consistent at the top and the bottom. But yeah, making these really small. And then another thing you can do with serifs, there's no reason why on an E, for example, you don't have to have these serifs sit like that. I sometimes have a tendency to do that, and then that especially looks busy to me. You can just have a serif be like a little, almost like a little hook. And so that's the way to like take it down a lot of notches, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Keeps it within the like two lines as well, and doesn't extend outside.
Oh yeah, like keeping it within this. Yeah. Hopefully that is like a kind of charming semi-serifed. Well, it is serifed, but very, very small. Obviously, this could easily, though, you could extend that wider, and you could curve that inward. And that's like another way. I mean, this is getting real sculptural now, actually, but obviously these serifs can get really intense really quickly.
Person who asked said they really like that, like E trick specifically. Was
Ooh, thanks. Yeah, and that's my first letter of my name, so of course that's like the example that makes sense to me.
Any other words or examples people want to see, or maybe I don't know if you have a different marker or pen you want to show how that like looks different.
Yes.
Whatever you write with really makes a huge.
It does. Okay. I thought I printed blank pages. I want whatever. Another thing that helps for me, because like, yes, I invented this little, I worked on this font myself, but sometimes I forget what I want all my letters to look like because I write differently all the time. So having the sheet with all of the alphabet on it can be helpful. There's nothing about that that's like cheating. Take it from me, the person who made it. So having that out is going to help me out. And Oh my gosh, what? Oh, right. Okay. So one of the things I love doing is combining two like hand lettering fonts. So I'm going to do something in script, and I just want to make two colors that go together nicely. I'm going to do something in a script cursive-y thing with my block letters.
And that pen that you're using for a script, what is that one?
This is a Pentel sign pen.
They're definitely a favorite around the Punkpost community.
This is, so there's kind of two ways to talk about this flexible tip pen. Pentel calls it a sign pen, and there are tons of different versions of these on the market, but they're called either a sign pen or a fude or fudonosuke, which is the like Japanese phrasing for it. And they're really like all the same kind of thing.
If you were at our workshop last Friday, Lauren used one of those for the majority of her writing.
Okay, so I'm gonna write the word. Oof, that was a thick. Oh my gosh, that was a really thick start. I'm gonna write the word hello, and I don't know if it's this gray marker or if it's my version of it, but I swear this one feels way softer.
Maybe you've been using that one a lot.
Maybe. My O is a little narrow. It's looking kind of awkward, but writing something with my block letters and then doing like a more traditional script type thing, like what we did with Lauren in the last workshop like this. I think that kind of thing is really, really cute.
Yeah, good mix. You can use your whole skill set together.
Yeah.
I was going to say, somebody said that the blacks and the grays always feel kind of soft to them.
Oh my God, thank you. I'm so glad, because I was like, I swear this isn't me. It makes me feel so much better. Another really good thing to do is figure out what a drop shadow would look like with block letters like this. So do we have time for that?
Yeah, real quick, I was going to say we have met our like hour, so if you have to go, totally understand, but we can stick around for a little bit and she can show you some shadowing with block letters. I think that's really a fun technique to do with block letters and sometimes easier to wrap your mind around than like a script cursive font. Yeah, so thank you for coming. If you need to go, totally understand. I'll send a follow-up email with some of the specifics we covered. And we have a workshop next Friday too. So you guys can sign up for that next week. We'll have the info out. But yeah, otherwise you are welcome to go ahead. I do have one question from the audience before you start, but what do you do when you make mistakes? Do you just start over or keep going? Maybe just in general, but I'm guessing maybe also as it applies to writing cards for Punkpost.
I am the queen of mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. And so I'm also big into like recycling and not wasting. So I always keep going. And there's so many different ways to keep going. And I think a lot of us in Punkpost, this is like one of the best parts is like idea sharing about this. But if I was going to write, sometimes I'm just in a state and I could be trying to write my mom's name, which is Jan. And if maybe somebody asks me a question and it's just like a real powerful ADHD day, I might come back and instead of doing an N, I would do an A again. I'd be like, okay, that's definitely not correct. Like her name is traditionally spelled Jan. So that's wrong. If I can get away with it, sometimes I'll try to make one letter look like another and switch colors and things like that. But one of the first, and I think best tips is you can always, especially with a broadline marker, you can always turn that into a banner. And this is just a little technical advice about markers. We have 2 layers right now where my letters were and where my marker went over it. So if it really shows through like that, I'll just come back and fill in between those letters so that I have like 2 layers of marker everywhere. And then the name doesn't show anymore. And then I could write on top of this with like a metallic marker or a white marker or black. Another thing that can work if I was going to do, and not turning something into a banner, if I was going to write her name, and let's say I accidentally got all overzealous and did an M instead of an N. Another thing I'll do sometimes is just thicken every single letter up. And this is all, you have to have other materials. This is not stuff I can just do with only a Crayola. So I'm sorry if that's disappointing. But I'll thicken up the whole thing. So now, okay, the way that ended up working out is I tried to sort of turn that M into an N, which is way too much. So I'll end up with like a bubbly outline around what this word would have been. And then, wow, I actually have one right next to me. I'll take a metallic pen or a white pen, and then I can kind of outline where these letters used to be. And they just look like they got like a cool fill and outline.
It's a really good tip. I can't say I've ever tried that one.
Oh, yeah, it totally. If you're getting tired of banners, basically. So then this is the trick. I'm kind of extending the width of that N. Maybe normally I would have drawn an N a little narrower, but because I wanted to take up the space of my accidental M, do that. And you could even like fill that in with black. But yeah, I try to always keep going.
And what's that white pen you were using?
Oh yeah, this is one of our favorites, like among the Punkpost crew. It's a Uniball Signo. So Uniball is like it's a brand you'd find at like Staples. It's a normal, easy to find office brand. And then Signos are also something that you find kind of all over the place. But this specifically, UM153, is the white one. And it has this extremely opaque ink. It did kind of tint blue because, probably because this was still a tiny bit wet, but you can layer this on top of itself. So like when it's a little bit blue like this, I can try to carefully, you can actually see too. Okay. I scribbled with it, and you might be able to see, probably not. There's some blue in it.
Yeah,
so like,
there's a little blue on it.
Yeah. So you can like clean it off like that and then come back and do a second coat. And I'll do that like really lightly, and I'll kind of wiggle my pen with a scribble type effect. And it's probably still going to dry a little bit blue, but it's a lot brighter and whiter. So I'll do that when I have a mistake so that it looks like I really fixed it, and also it'll photograph better. Yeah. When we take pictures for our customers.
The people are loving this idea. I think it's super smart. And if you just give it a little time to like dry before you do the white, that's great. And another pro tip, don't fold it up until it's had some like nice time to dry, because it will sandwich itself on the other side.
It sure will. Yes, absolutely.
See,
of course it didn't, but seriously.
Of course it didn't. Yeah. But it can, yeah.
That's a really good tip. Another thing, sometimes like, I wouldn't call this necessarily a mistake, but like, I'm just going to pick a short name that I can see right now. So I'm going to write Gay. Sometimes I will go to fix a letter, and let's see, I have to actually make a mistake first. Okay, so sometimes I'll go to fix a letter. I want all of these lines to touch. So when I do this, sometimes with my Crayolas, I guess orange is the color that is like least obvious with, but sometimes when you do this and you do a second layer, like with the blue, your colors really, really show, like it really is obvious where you've gone over it a second time. So when that happens, usually I'll take it as an opportunity to go over everything a second time. And when I have to thicken something up to make it connect, then I just take that as an opportunity to thicken everything up a little bit. So keeping it consistent is what makes me think it looks like a convincing fix. But also, so I can even everybody out by doing that. But what I really wanted was the effect that blue gave, where the second time I went over it, it was really dark. it's not working, whatever. Okay, but one of the things that you can do here is keep layering that same color. So I'll just start coloring only at the top here. And with any color other than orange, it gives a really nice like ombre effect to the letter. And so when I fix them, sometimes that's what'll start me, like prompt me on doing that ombre effect. Okay,
yeah,
green will do it. My cooperative color. Okay. All right, like that. So I'll come back in here and connect it. And then I end up with like this dark line right there. And especially sometimes when sorry, I'm trying to get this lighting to really show it to you, but especially when I'm thinking about photographing this, it might not show that much in person, but in pictures, it might show up like a lot. So if I just darken up the whole top half of this letter, I can get like a little faux two-tone going where it's like dark, dark green on top and then lighter green on the bottom.
Yeah. Those are all great fixes. And your like comment about consistency or like doing it throughout is always a good thing to keep in mind. Like you made a banner at the top, maybe you make another banner later to like pull it all together.
Yes. It's easy to not want to do when you like make a mistake. It's easy to not want to keep doing it because it feels uncomfortable. But if you keep doing it throughout the card or the project or even the word, like that's wonderful. Helps a lot.
Right.
Okay.
So
So,
back to shadowing. We got
yes, thank you. I was like, for a second, I thought, do I even have a plan? So people talk all the time about how easy it is to figure out drop shadows. And like, that's great and everything. And it is easy for me because I teach fine art as well. But it's actually, it'll be like, it's just, think about where the shadow would go. And that kind of talk really frustrates me. So when I think about where I'm going to put my shadow, like my drop shadow on letters, sometimes I will draw a little light bulb in the corner so that I can think about, this is an old-fashioned light bulb because it's cuter. So I can think about the light coming from here. So it's going to be hitting the right-hand sides of all my letters. And so that's one thing that helps me out. And then the other thing, I'm hoping I can use my little clamp light here to show you what we're talking about. So if we could pretend that this marker was my letter I, the light would be coming from where I drew my little light bulb here. And that is what is a drop shadow. So it goes a little bit underneath, because of where the light's coming from, it goes a little bit underneath this letter I, as we're imagining that Crayola to be. But if it was just from the right, it wouldn't go underneath it at all. So hopefully that little explanation helps a bit more than just someone saying, just think about where the light comes from.
I'm a visual learner, so I like your example.
Me too, obviously, visual learner. So I don't think I can even, personally in my own mind, I don't think I can write my letters by writing the shadow first and then writing the letter on top. It's probably a very good method, but I think I would need someone to explain it to me first. So I'm just going to go over my E that's on here in gray. Okay. Now, anything that's pointing directly at this light would not have a shadow. So I can even put a little yellow there, like the tips of these wouldn't have shadows. And because of that downward angle also, the top level of my E wouldn't have a shadow, but we'd have a big one right along the back. And because of this up to down type angle, we would have a little shadow right there. Wow, that's like, that gray is very dark.
No worries.
Often I will turn these upside down too when I go to do my shadows. So I think it helps me get out of the mindset that I am writing letters, and it helps me to think more about like as if I'm working with art. So it's easier for me to figure it out. Like, okay, so if my light's coming from the right and it's a little bit above, I'm gonna have, so I switched to orange so you can actually see it. I would have shadows along that left-hand side. And then like before, I would also have one that goes underneath. I think that's kind of the big choice when you do shadows. Do you want it to go just the length of the letter, or do you want it to like hook underneath or hook above? So this is all correct. And usually when I write a word like this, like if I had 5 cards in a day, let's say, at least one card would have a shadow on the wrong side on one of my letters because that's just my brain. But if I turn this upside down, it's for some reason, it's just a lot easier for me to say, oh, okay, there's going to be a shadow along the bottom, on the right, and along the bottom edge of that top bar for the eye, maybe even right there. It's just way easier for my brain when I switch it around like that. But it's really smart to actually write out an entire alphabet like this and add in those drop shadows and then use it as a reference. That's why I make all those mistakes, is because I don't have a reference sheet with me. If I did, I would just glance up, maybe I'm going to do that. I think I just talked myself into having a drop shadow reference sheet.
That's a great idea. And like the more you do it, the easier it gets, but it definitely is like a little bit of a like mind game when I go to do it every time still.
Yeah. And you can also, so this is what it looked like if you were just keeping it really, like imagining that you had just a light straight at the side. So not that one. I can just go straight down on that bar, straight down on this one. And I always start with my biggest shadows as well. I think that helps too. It kind of gives me something to like cling to that makes sense. So I can also see that all of these shadows are on the left-hand sides of my lines. So that's another way I can figure it out. And it probably also is easier, I guess, just like writing these letter forms, it's easier to use things that have straight lines. It's probably also easier to figure out the drop shadow on straight line letters, because when you have a curve, you have to change your shadow for the curve. So I'm going to write an S really big because that's the one with the most curves. I'm going to pretend again that I have like a really similar light situation. So my light would be shining like that onto my letter. So I know that this part here and this part here for sure would not have shadows because those are getting drenched in light. So that's another like great way to start. Okay, if that's the bright side, then that would be the dark side. And then I'm thinking about the light. I would start my shadow on this side of the S on the left-hand side. I would start it after the furthest point out of that curve. So that is probably the widest point. I'll just mark it so that it's obvious for you guys. So that's where, like, how I would decide where to start my shadow over here. And then if I have the space and like the control to do so, I will often start it like I did here, skinny, and then I'll let it get thicker toward the bottom. And I know that that's correct also because I've got this imaginary sunlight right there. And then again, as we get out of this curve, it's going to go back to kind of copying this one. We're going to have a shadow on the left here. And also when I'm a little bit less confident with these, I'll probably start with skinnier shadows and then I can make them thicker and thicker as I get more confident with them. But this is something you might notice, like it's a stylistic choice you can make. It almost looks like you could imagine a thick line going through that S right there and like the little bit of orange. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. We got somebody asking for a Q and an R shadowed.
Oh yeah. R confuses me, so this is gonna be good. See how I do. So I'm going to start on this outside edge on the left because that to me is like the most obvious. It's the thickest piece of the letter and it's obviously on the opposite side of my light source. So I can start there. I think that's another good tip. Start with what you're confident with and then you can use that as kind of like your guide for what else to do. So I'm going to start a little skinny shadow on the inside of this thin line for my Q, and I can start it a ways away from the shadow, from this orange shadow, but you can also take it right up to that on the inside. Make this a little bit big so you can see it. And when it comes to stuff like that, you can either stop your marker at that little black dash, or you can just draw your way through it. And it will, like with Crayolas, I did pick up some of the black on my marker here and I did pull through it a little bit. So if I wanted to be more perfect technically, I would have stopped. But my goal is to have it look like it's continuous.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is another place where you could make a choice. Like I'm thinking about that light source and asking myself, would there be a little shadow underneath the bottom edge of that cue or not? And I'm just going to do it. I'm a maximalist. If there's an opportunity to do more, I'm probably just going to do it. All right, with my R, I'm going to start at the easy spot again, which is over here on the left. And then another easy one for me to think about is this other thick, bold line. So I'll do that one. And I'm stopping like with the curve. If I have a curve like that, I'm going to pull my marker in, and I can't help myself, I did right onto the black marker because it makes a nicer curve. And then here, I'm going to start at the apex. So where there's like the very top edge, right where the top of the R hits, that's where I'm going to start my shadow. And then, so I do these big pieces first, and the R has all kinds of extra bits, things that where there's like a line and there's a left-hand side to it. You want to put a shadow there. So that would be that little bit right there, little shadow on the left. And then you can also do a little shadow just right on the inside right there. I'll make it bigger actually. These are bigger than I would want them, but that way you can see them.
Nice. That's all the questions I have. Does anybody else have any last minute questions? Anything else you'd like to add, Elyse?
No, just
you covered so much.
Thanks. Thanks for hanging out with us, and I hope you feel like you can continue to like try different things with hand lettering, and that you feel inspired, and just know that like it was more than one full ream of paper written on multiple times before I felt comfortable enough to say I'm a hand lettering artist. So practice makes progress.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to take away from these workshops that we're hosting, is that it takes a lot of practice to get really good, and you will see a lot of improvement as you go. We have someone asking, how do you warm up before you start, or if there are any like good warm-up drills or anything?
Warm-ups are actually really fun because a lot of hand lettering artists who like offer classes and stuff will give out warm-up pages for free. And so there's some really interesting ones because really what you want to do for warming up is like get used to how you're holding your markers. And I guess I would say for block letters specifically, I would warm up by transitioning between thin and thick lines. And I know this is really exciting, right? It's like right up there with watching paint dry, but it's really good to try to get like really particular, try to get your thick lines to stop and start really evenly. Because even if you create a really cute letter that doesn't have super even pressure, you want to be able to do that purposefully. There are many different layers of rules to like calligraphy and hand lettering, and there does not have to be any rules at all, but I like to know why I'm making a choice and like what the other options would be. So honestly, just thick and thin strokes is such a good one. But also, this is one my mom always did when I was growing up, and I was like, how can she do that? And I still don't do this often enough, but to do continuous circles. This is like boot camp, I would say.
Yeah.
I hate it. I hate doing that. My mom's really good at it, and it makes me crazy. It's so good for you, though. Your
mom is actually here and joining us.
I thought she might be. Hi, Mom. I love you.
She says that you thought she had magic powers.
I did. That's actually one of my favorite ways to say it. She would pick up this like chisel point pen and just, Mom, you should teach one of these, but often she would like write my name, and then I probably should have shown you guys this. That's a really cool flourish to do at the end of an E. Anyway, she would do that, and I would just like, what? She's amazing. Witchcraft, no. Another thing that's great to do is draw yourself a box and then just fill it in with the same kind of swirls and whirls. This is a really good thing to try to force yourself to do, like similar to that. But if I don't have a boundary, I won't do it, or I won't know when to stop or whatever. So even filling it in with like straight angles, all that stuff.
Nice. I should probably do some more things like that.
Yeah, it's really easy not to when you are writing cards every day, because you have like a job that involves writing.
You have a chunk of time and you're trying to like go through it, but it is really
Yeah.
good to like go back and practice basics and train
Yeah.
yourself to like think about what you're doing a little more than just doing it.
Definitely.
But yeah. Anything else you'd like to add, Elyse? Or I guess where can the people find you if they want to see more
Oh,
of your work or chat with
I
you about anything?
yeah, I have a website that is very incomplete right now, but it's just myname.com. And normally you can see my 2D work, so oil painting and watercolor, and also digital work. I like to do digital collage. And I am like starting up a section on there too called student resources. So when people take a class with me, there's like companion stuff to those classes, like this alphabet. Yeah. Oh, and then Instagram is the same. It's at Elyse Gambino. So that's how you can find me.
Perfect. And how can they request you on cards for Punkpost
Oh,
cards?
yeah. So when you order a card, either on our app or on the website, you can enter, it's in the request field, right?
Yep.
Okay, good. It's like, I think it's like one of the very last things you do before you like, you're completely done with the entire ordering process. You can type in people's names that you request, or like, so you could type in my name. And then you can also favorite people, which can affect who you get assigned to as well. So like when you make an order, some like magical behind the scenes person assigns your order to an artist. And if you go through and like click those hearts, sometimes you can get assigned to those people too. But the best thing is to just request me.
Yeah. And we also, I did meet to like test Elise's knowledge of how things work
Like
there.
I was taking a test.
Yeah. You can also like favorite people. So if she's ever done a card for you, you can see in your like Punkpost outbox, you can just tap her name and it will come up and you can tap the little heart. But you can do that anywhere actually. And you can favorite Elyse. You can browse all the other artists we have. We have more than 150 now around the country. They all bring something to the team that's different and fun. So yeah. Oh, she drew us a little heart. Yeah, I guess thank you guys so much for coming. And like I mentioned, I'll send a follow-up email after this with just some of these quick resources. And we are going to have another workshop next Friday. That will be our last one of this month of like community month and highlighting what our team does. Missy will be hosting that one, and she's got a really fun script and really fun style that not a lot of other people do, and I haven't seen. So she is really fun, and it will be a good time. So thank you guys all for coming, and hope you have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.